Day 1059 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 815,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,670 in the past day. Then as for hardware losses, 12 tanks, 13 APVs, and 4 artillery. Oh, plus an almost always respectable soft target volume of 124. Then to a weekly look at the territory of control stats, aka Snail theory, where there has been very little in the way of rate of change over the past few weeks, possibly quite a bit longer in fact, as most recently Russia has gained an additional 0.01 of a percentage point of Ukrainian land as a contrast to the same time last week. So that's taken into account activities in Chasiv Yar, Toretsk, Pokrovsk, and the Kharkova direction. Now, the reported $1.9 billion Russia spends annually on the online misinformation sector, which for example mostly just ends up being Russian trolls in the comments below and all around the internet, will have you believe that Ukraine has lost the war already, and that Russia is making frontline breakthrough after frontline breakthrough, and all communicated so to break morale and push Ukraine to capitulation at the negotiating table. And yet, contrary to these types of breakthrough claims, Russia's performance is far from impressive. After all, this is an invasion against their land neighbor on relatively flat plains that's taken a lot longer than 2 or 3 days. Oh, and since I stated the term snail theory a moment ago, so for the snail math lovers among you, here we go. So let's choose any spot on the map randomly. Let's dive into Seversk, okay, good example, as good as any other really, and choosing a spot on the map from an east to west direction, because theoretically a snail starting at this frontline position this day a week ago, it would have reached all the way up to the outskirts of the settlement of Seversk, some 8 kilometers or 5 miles away, given that snails travel at 0.03 miles per hour, and assuming the snail works non-stop to get there, which I believe to be a fair comparison in that regard, because the Russian army never stops with its aggressive posture for all hours of the day and night. So this scene here would be the distance traversed by a snail. Meanwhile, as a direct comparison to the Russian army located right here on the front lines, Russia didn't move the needle at all in the past 7 days. So once again, we see the speedy snail putting the Russian army to shame with such a stark contrast in performance, highlighting the inefficiencies of Russia's military efforts. Then to give the snail a break, it's worked pretty hard, so we'll head across to the Russian map now, and to the little heard from region of Kostroma, where a charcoal burning complex in Bogchino erupted in flames. Local firefighters battled the blaze for hours, but losing critical equipment in the aftermath as found out. Now, a charcoal burning complex has many military applications, not the least of which is that charcoal is a key ingredient in traditional gunpowder. It's also used in steel production and metal refining, but also certain military-grade composites and coatings rely on carbon-rich materials for which charcoal is a precursor. So the facility, now non-operational, faces an uncertain future, and while the cause of the fire remains a mystery, there is certainly no shortage of suspicious fires through Russia's industrial sector, raising questions about safety standards, effectiveness of defense measures, leading to the real potential for economic ripple effects. Then on the map, headed to Voronezh and back to Lisky for some pretty serious updates, where the fire at the oil depot, due to Ukrainian UAV strikes, is into its 3rd day, seemingly spreading to more tanks with each and every passing day. Apparently, the local crews cannot extinguish the blaze, and are simply waiting for it to burn out. And then on that topic of oil depots set alight, reportedly the Engels oil depot that was on fire for 6 days had a follow-up strike and now is into its 3rd day of burning as well, again, thus failing to contain the fire twice in 1 month. And in light of these events, soon enough I'm going to put back up oil depots on the Russian losses page, but it will need to be expressed as a percentage in terms of overall loss of capacity, though I might still be tempted to list the actual raw number of successful strikes as well. And on that note, anything else you want, just let me know in the comments below. Then headed across the map to the ongoing activity in the Kursk region, with a destroyed Russian mech column that tried to breach near the border of Ukraine in the Dorino direction. Additionally seen here was a Russian armored vehicle disabled after being used as a bridge layer. Some suggested it was an old Soviet bridge layer, the MTU-72, though that seems entirely unlikely, missing some key components there. Instead, it looks like an armored vehicle being used as a bridge layer, complemented by a series of wooden pallets. Then also in Kursk, although some delayed footage, showing a Bradley infantry fighting vehicle taking infantry to an assault outside of Viktorovka, dated January 15 of the 47th Brigade. But then also for the region, Ukraine's 8th Special Operations Forces unit is at it again in a series of precision strikes, obliterating Russian vehicles, artillery, and personnel. Also note the use of the advanced 3rd generation ENVGB night vision goggles, used here by the SOF, which provides an augmented reality overlay that assists in visualizing fellow soldiers in the field, and of course can detect non-friendly soldiers using their advanced imaging capabilities for an enhanced situational awareness. Then headed across to Ukraine with some of the biggest issues for the AFU to contend with right now, including at Velika Novosilka, a location that Russia has been eyeing off for some time now, in terms of Russian offensives from the southeast, the southwest, and the northeast, with the location under encirclement threat. Now, at a glance for this location, it looks barely more than 2 kilometers from the southeast to the northwest, but applying the ruler, this location is more closer to 4.5 to 5 kilometers in reach. In fact, this location was quite often reported as being in a critical state well over a month ago, but even so, the AFU by no means ever make for a quick withdrawal anywhere on the map effectively. But the state of play here is that Russian resources will pour everything they can into this location, although no doubt the surrounding natural river obstacles on this front have likely slowed down the Russian army on the approach. Then headed further west on the map, as Ukraine's 40th Coastal Defense Brigade thwarted a Russian landing attempt in the Dnipro Delta. Using a mix of regular and cluster munitions, Ukrainian forces, backed by drones and artillery, delivered a punishing response. Then taking a quick look around on the map today, so we saw a destroyed Russian Tor M2 SAM system. Then also Ukraine's 44th Separate Artillery Brigade destroyed 3 Russian trailer-mounted howitzers and a field ammunition depot during counter-battery combat. Then in the east, and in a different light, or should I say almost at the speed of light, because fiber optic cables from FPV drones now are shown to be crisscrossing the fields of Ukraine. The fixed line fiber optic drones that are used in the field to overcome signal jamming against their operator can apparently be found on all fronts of this war now. Now, some might wonder, tracing a fiber optic cable back to an enemy FPV operator, is that a thing? Well, it's not practical in terms of a military tactic, because then it would essentially mean that you have to cross enemy lines. And so for a refresher, the fiber optic drones utilized by both sides is considered a countermeasure to those electronic warfare tactics. But as with all weapons platforms in war, the next step will be to counteract the counteracting measure. Now, hard to say exactly what that is going to look like, but the coating on the fiber can be easily ignited as seen here, which ruins the underlying glass with regards to optical transmission. Then headed across to some news for today. So in a boost to Ukraine's air defences, the UK will deliver new Gravehawk systems this year. Currently, there are no publicly available images, likely due to operational security considerations, and so developed swiftly to meet urgent battlefield needs, this innovative system is roughly the size of a shipping container and can utilise existing air-to-air missiles already in service with Ukraine. 2 prototypes were tested in September, with 15 more set for delivery to Ukraine soon. This joint initiative, funded by both the UK and Denmark, display the ongoing robust commitment to enhancing Ukraine's defensive capabilities. And then on the topic of the UK, during his visit to Kyiv, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced that British troops will join the future peacekeeping mission in Ukraine once the war ends. Starmer also emphasized the broader implications of Russia's potential success, highlighting how it could impact the UK and its values for years to come. But now with a newly signed centennial security agreement, it not only strengthens military ties, but also paves the way for deep cooperation in technology, education, and economic resilience between the two nations. Then to some more news, the Russian State Duma continues to propose general mobilization and to prepare the entire male population for a potential war against the West. Russian Member of Parliament Alexei Zurolev claims European nations are gearing up to attack Russia by 2028 to 2029. And I'm reminded here of the popular phrase used for Russia, that every lie is an admission of guilt, and other variations of that line. So his remarks suggest a shift in Russia's internal narrative, framing the West as an imminent threat. This rhetoric not only seeks to rally public support, but also distract from ongoing domestic issues, and there is a lot of them. So if fear-mongering becomes the new norm, it could backfire, breeding skepticism among a populace already wary of endless conflict and mobilization. Which leads me into a similar topic of news, because Putin has signed a decree calling up Russian reservists for military training in 2025. Now, ever since the commencement of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russia has continued to increase the size of its military every year. Active and reservists, surprise, surprise. And for this latest decree, Russians are told that military training does not mean being drafted into the army, but that these moves are instead about increasing skills, quote unquote. And I'd like to believe that. I'm sure many Russians would like to believe that as well. Though many can guess that this is just another form of hidden or shadow mobilization. Essentially what happens is you make it to training, then you get strong-armed into signing up to an SMO contract. Russia is slowly killing itself economically here, but doing so in a more literal sense as well. Then, as for another Russian state media TV segment, with more of the complete utter madness from all of your favorite characters, including Syelovov and Simonyan, where in this latest example, after an ad break, Syelovov and the crew gets right back into it, saying to destroy the city of Kyiv, to hell with it, quote unquote. Does he even realize what he's suggesting here? I guess not, because then he doubles down, suggesting the same treatment for Kharkiv and Odessa as well. I do wonder exactly how many primetime anchors in the modern developed world can you actually find talking like this on television throughout the globe. Though I'm sure a few of you might jump to the comments to say that the mistake I made just there was presuming Russia to be a modern developed nation. Oh, and in this latest round of late night madness, it's all about justification, as they quoted parts of the Old Testament to justify violent rhetoric, completely misinterpreting the context to suit their aggressive agenda. It's a story as old as time. Then headed across to some Russian economy news, as Russia's national wealth fund is now rapidly vanishing. As of December, the liquid assets plummeted 30%, leaving just $37.5 billion. But in the wider context, just to know, this represents a staggering 70% loss since 2022. This also includes holdings of the Chinese yuan and gold reserves, also sharply down, accounting for the liquidity loss. And so now, as you can see here, due to sanctions, illiquid assets, as opposed to the liquid assets, are forcibly on the rise in Russia. And in short, this reflects Russia's attempt to adapt to sanctions, but noting that these assets are much less useful for real economic needs, as they are part of much harder to access investments. Now, added to this, the spanner thrown in the works not seen here is the government and industry-wide crippling debt faced by the country as a whole. And it all comes back to those sustained high interest rate levels in the end, drowning in debt. And so overall, with such dwindling liquid reserves, the Kremlin's financial flexibility is tightening. So as Russia's beloved SMO drags on, the heavier the toll on Russia's financial backbone. I mean, imagine the day for Russians when Putin has dried up their national sovereign wealth fund, all for a war right next door that they cannot win. What a waste. And maybe, in part, that's what's required for Russians to really wake up. Then headed across to a super quick funny to round it all off for today, guys. So Wikipedia has just updated its list of Russian ground forces vehicles. And really, just to point out here, I'm not even joking, as now included on the illustrious list is e-scooters and dirt bikes for the world's second army. And some of these descriptions are short, but to the point as well. For example, dirt bikes. It says, on the table to the far right, quote, began being issued to Russian frontline soldiers in spring of 2024 to help mitigate growing shortages of armored vehicles. A very fair and acceptable assessment. Desert Cross golf buggies made the list too. And you can be certain that Buhanka vans made the list as well. And it's all very odd, isn't it? Usually a ground forces list of equipment advances over time, technologically, in strength and power. But no, not for Russia. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!